Kate's hands trembled as she stared at William's phone. Harry's text burning into her vision. You chose the institution over your own brother. How do I forgive that? For months, William had been carrying this secret late-night messages with his estranged brother, a rift tearing their family apart while he smiled through royal duties. Kate felt the betrayal cut deep. He'd shut her out of the one battle that mattered most. But when she finally confronted him, when William's carefully constructed walls shattered, and he showed her the months of painful texts, Harry's rage, his grief, his impossible accusations, Kate realized this wasn't just about secrets. This was about two brothers trapped in their own prisons, and a family on the verge of permanent fracture. Then Charles arrived unannounced at their door, holding an old photograph, and everything changed. Harry was ready to talk. But there was more. Something about Charles's health, about succession, about time running out. The house settled into its evening rhythm, that particular quiet that comes when children are winding down, when the day's energy begins to pool in corners like gathering shadows. Kate stood in their bedroom at Anmer Hall, the curtains still open to the last bruised light of sunset. She'd come upstairs to grab her phone, forgotten on the charger downstairs, only to realize halfway up the stairs that she didn't actually need it. Williams would do just fine to check the time. His phone sat on the nightstand, face up, innocuous. She reached for it without thinking, the gesture as automatic as breathing. The screen illuminated at her touch. 11:47 p.m. No, that couldn't be right. It was barely past 8, and then she saw it. Not the time at all, but a notification banner sliding down from the top of the screen. A text message. The preview was short, just enough to stop her heart mid-beat. Harry, you could have stood up for us. You chose the institution over your own brother. How do I forgive that? Kate's hand trembled. The phone felt suddenly heavy, foreign, dangerous. She should put it down, should walk away, should pretend she'd never seen it, never touched it, never crossed this invisible threshold into something William had deliberately kept from her. But her eyes wouldn't move from the screen. The words burned themselves into her vision. You chose the institution over your own brother. The weight of that sentence, the accusation in it, the pain beneath the anger it pressed against her chest like a physical thing. She sank onto the edge of the bed, still holding the phone, still staring at those words. Downstairs, she could hear William's laughter, bright, unguarded, the sound he made when he was fully present with the children. Louis must have said something funny. The warmth of that laughter drifted up through the floorboards, and it felt like a betrayal of its own. How could he sound so light when he was carrying this? When Harry's words were sitting in his phone like unexploded ordnance? Her reflection caught in the darkened window across the room, a ghost woman holding a glowing rectangle trapped between two worlds. The Kate in the glass looked lost. How long? That was the question spiraling through her mind. How long had this been going on? The text implied a conversation, maybe many conversations, an ongoing dialogue she knew nothing about. William had been texting with Harry, his estranged brother, the wound that never quite healed, and he hadn't said a word to her. She forced herself to put the phone down, placing it exactly where it had been. Her hands were still shaking. She stood, smoothed her sweater, caught sight of herself in the mirror above the dresser, composed herself, put on the face she'd learned to wear, the one that said, everything is fine, I'm fine, we're all fine. But she wasn't fine. The living room was a chaos of blankets and cushions when Kate came downstairs. William had constructed an elaborate fort, with Charlotte and Louis, the kind of architectural marvel that required dining chairs, throw pillows, and an impressive amount of engineering for something that would be dismantled before bed. Louis was inside, giggling, his small voice echoing in the fabric cave. Charlotte was adjusting the entrance, utterly serious about the structural integrity of their creation. George sat on the sofa with a book, but his eyes kept flicking up to watch his father and siblings, a small smile playing at his mouth. He was too old for blanket forts now, at least in his own estimation, but young enough to feel the pull of them. "There you are," William said, looking up as Kate entered. His face was flushed from laughing, his hair slightly disheveled. "We've built the finest fortress in all of Norfolk. Louis is the king, apparently. Charlotte is the royal architect." "I can see that," Kate said. Her voice sounded normal. "That was good. Very impressive." But something in her tone must have shifted, some microscopic alteration in pitch or rhythm, because William's smile faltered. He studied her face, and she felt the weight of his attention like a spotlight. "You all right?" he asked. The question hung between them. She could tell him now. Could say, "Actually, no, I saw something on your phone, we need to talk." Could crack this moment open and let the truth spill out right here, in front of the blanket fort, in front of George's careful observation and Charlotte's oblivious joy. "Just tired," she said instead. William nodded, but his eyes lingered on her face a moment longer. He knew her too well, knew the difference between tired and something's wrong. But he didn't push, and she was grateful for that. Or maybe she resented it. She couldn't quite tell which. "Mummy, come see," Louis called from inside the fort, and Kate moved toward it, grateful for the distraction, for the excuse to look anywhere but at William's searching gaze. The rest of the evening unspooled in its familiar pattern. Snacks, negotiations about screen time, Charlotte's complaint that Louis had scratched her drawing, George's quiet request for help with his maths homework, the ordinary friction and music of family life, and beneath it all, the text message pulsing like a heartbeat Kate couldn't unhear. Bedtime came with its rituals. Teeth brushed, pajamas negotiated, stories read in voices that shifted with the characters. Kate moved through it all on autopilot, smiling at the right moments, answering questions, smoothing hair back from foreheads. She was in Louis's room, tucking the duvet around his small body, when George appeared in the doorway. "Mum?" His voice was tentative. "Is Uncle Harry going to visit soon?" Kate's hand stilled on the blanket. Across the room, William had gone very quiet. He'd been adjusting the curtains, but now he turned, and even in the low light, Kate could see the tension that had suddenly gripped his shoulders. "Maybe someday, mate," William said. His voice was gentle, but Kate heard something else underneath it now, something she hadn't recognized before, when she hadn't known to listen for it. Grief. Deep and old and unresolved. "Charlotte said he lives in America now," George continued, moving into the room to sit on the edge of Louis's bed. "That's very far away." "It is," William agreed. "Does he like it there?" "I think so. Do you miss him?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Kate watched William's face, watched him struggle with how much truth to give an 11-year-old boy at bedtime. "Yes," William said finally. "I do." George nodded, processing this. "Okay," he said. Then, with the easy acceptance of childhood, he kissed Louis's forehead and headed toward his own room. "Night, Mum. Night, Dad." "Good night, darling," Kate managed. When George had gone, when Louis's breathing had deepened into sleep, William and Kate stood in the hallway between the children's rooms. The house felt suddenly too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. Kate almost told him then, opened her mouth, the words right there. "I know. I saw the text. I know you've been talking to Harry." But before she could speak, William ran a hand over his face and said, "I'm exhausted. Big day tomorrow, meeting with the private secretaries about the Commonwealth tour." He moved toward their bedroom, and Kate followed, the moment slipping away like water through her fingers. The text message sat between them, invisible and enormous, a ghost neither of them could name. Their bedroom felt different now. Kate noticed things she'd stopped seeing. The way William's side of the bed was always slightly more rumpled. The reading glasses he'd started needing folded on his nightstand. The photograph of all 5 of them on the dresser, smiling, intact, frozen in a moment that felt increasingly fragile. William changed into his pajamas, moved through his evening routine. Kate did the same, the silence between them filling with unspoken words. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, braided her hair, All the small rituals that marked the end of a day. All the while, her heart hammered against her ribs. When they finally climbed into bed, William reached for his phone, scrolled through something, emails probably, or the news. Kate watched his profile in the blue-white glow of the screen. This man she'd loved for so many years, this man she thought she knew completely, and suddenly she couldn't bear it anymore. Couldn't carry the weight of what she'd seen, couldn't pretend she hadn't seen it. "William," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I saw a text earlier, from Harry, on your phone." His thumb stopped mid-scroll. For a long moment, he didn't move at all, didn't look up, didn't speak, barely seemed to breathe. Then, slowly, he raised his eyes to meet hers. The phone screen went dark between them. The silence stretched. Kate could hear her own pulse in her ears, could hear the house settling. Around them, could hear everything except William's voice. "How much did you see?" he asked finally. His voice was quiet, carefully controlled. "Enough to know you've been carrying something you haven't told me about." William set the phone down on the nightstand, face down this time. He ran both hands through his hair, a gesture she recognized: frustration, exhaustion, the weight of something too heavy to hold. When he looked at her again, his eyes were sad in a way that made her chest ache. "I didn't want to burden you," he said. "Not after everything with your own health, the surgeries, the recovery. You've been through so much, Kate. The last thing you needed was, so you thought keeping secrets was better?" The words came out sharper than she intended. Years of "we face everything together" suddenly feeling like a promise he'd broken. "We said we'd face everything together, William. Everything. This isn't just about us." His voice rose slightly, then fell again, as if he'd remembered the children sleeping down the hall. "It's Harry. It's complicated. It's about family and duty and things I can't fix, no matter how hard I try. I've been trying, Kate, for months, and I didn't tell you because—" He broke off, jaw working. "Because I didn't want you to see me fail at this too." The vulnerability in that last sentence broke something open in Kate's chest. She saw it then, not the secret-keeping, but the shame underneath it. The weight he'd been carrying alone, not to protect her, but because he couldn't bear for her to witness his inability to mend what was broken. "Oh, William," she breathed. She reached for his hand in the darkness, and when their fingers met, she felt him trembling. And in that touch, in that moment, Kate understood that what she'd stumbled onto wasn't just a text message. It was the whole weight of loss and duty and impossible choices that William had been shouldering in silence, trying to be strong enough for all of them, trying to hold together a family that was fracturing in ways none of them could control. The text had been meant for William. But maybe, in seeing it, Kate had found something she was meant to see after all. The places where her husband hurt in ways he couldn't say, where the brother he'd lost haunted him in text messages late at night, where the future king was still just a man who missed his family and didn't know how to fix what had been broken. They sat there in the darkness, hands clasped, the ghost of Harry's words hovering between them, and Kate realized they were only at the beginning of this conversation. The real unraveling was still to come. William didn't speak for a long time after that. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, hands clasped between them like he was praying or trying to hold something together that was falling apart. Kate waited, her heart still racing, knowing that whatever came next would change the landscape of their marriage in ways she couldn't yet predict. Finally, he reached for his phone again, unlocked it. His thumb hovered over the screen, hesitating, and then he opened the messages, scrolled up and up. Kate watched the months unspool in that blue-lit scroll, weeks and weeks of messages she'd known nothing about. "It started in March," William said quietly, "late one night. I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about Mum's birthday, about how Harry and I used to market together, and I sent him a message. Nothing profound. Just thinking of you today." He turned the phone so Kate could see. There it was, William's message from months ago. And below it, hours later, Harry's response. Miss her every day. Miss you too, if I'm honest. Kate's throat tightened. After that, it was sporadic. William continued. He'd reach out, usually late at night his time. I'd wake up to messages, sometimes just a few words, sometimes paragraphs, and I'd respond. We'd text back and forth for a few days, and then nothing. Weeks of silence. Then he'd reach out again. William scrolled further, and Kate leaned in to read. The texts revealed a relationship she hadn't known existed, fragile, fractured, but stubbornly alive. Harry's words oscillated between vulnerability and accusation, longing and bitterness. I miss George's laugh. I miss Charlotte's sass. I miss being an uncle to kids who actually know me. But I can't come back to that cage. You understand that, don't you? Or maybe you don't. Maybe you've always been too comfortable in your role. Kate felt the complexity of it settle in her chest like a weight. This wasn't a simple estrangement. A clean break that time might heal. This was two brothers trapped in their own prisons. Harry in his exile, William in his duty, both unable or unwilling to find the door that might lead them back to each other. He's so angry, Kate whispered. He is, William agreed. But he's also... He scrolled to another message. This one from just 2 weeks ago. Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if Mum had lived? If we'd been normal? I think about it all the time. I think we would have been okay. He's grieving, Kate finished. William nodded. He set the phone down, rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. I've been trying to build a bridge. For months. Every time I think we're making progress, every time the messages feel less hostile, something happens, a headline, a story in the press, a comment from someone in the family that gets back to him, and we're right back to this. This place where everything I say is wrong, where every olive branch I extend gets burned. His voice cracked on that last word, and Kate saw what she should have seen months ago. Her husband was drowning, had been drowning, and he'd been doing it silently, alone, because he thought that was what strength looked like. William, she said softly. She moved closer, took his hand. Why didn't you tell me? Because I'm failing. The words came out flat, defeated. I'm failing as a brother. I'm failing to honor Mum's one wish, that we'd always look out for each other, always stay close. I'm failing as a future king, because what kind of king can't even keep his own family together? And I didn't want you to see that. Didn't want you to look at me and see all the ways I'm not enough. Kate's heart broke. She moved off the bed, sank to the floor in front of him, and pulled his face down to meet her eyes. You listen to me, she said, her voice fierce with love and frustration in equal measure. You are not failing. You're trying. There's a difference. And you've been trying alone. Carrying this weight alone. Protecting everyone from the truth. Harry from more pain. Me from worry. The children from knowing their family is fractured. But you can't hold all of this by yourself. You were never meant to. William's eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. I didn't know what else to do. You tell me, Kate said. That's what you do. We face it, together. That's the promise we made. They moved to the floor then, backs against the bed, shoulders touching. The carpet beneath them was soft, the room lit only by the lamp on Kate's nightstand, casting long shadows across the walls. It was the kind of physical intimacy that wasn't romantic, but something deeper, two people anchoring each other in a storm. Kate felt her own defenses beginning to crack. The anger she'd felt earlier, at being kept in the dark, at the secret texts, at the months of silence it was subsiding, replaced by something more complicated. Understanding. Shared fear. I haven't been fair to you either, she said quietly. William turned to look at her, surprised. Since the surgery, since everything with my health, I've felt the weight of what's coming more acutely. The crown. The role. What it will mean for the children. And I've been afraid, William. Terrified, actually. But I didn't want to add to your burden, so I didn't say anything. William's hand. found hers in the space between them. Kate, what if we can't balance it? The question she'd been holding for months finally escaped. Duty and family. What if the institution asks for everything, and we have nothing left for each other? For George and Charlotte and Louis? What if they end up like you and Harry, torn apart by the very thing that's supposed to bind us together? William was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think about that every day. They sat with that confession, the enormity of it. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. Inside, they held on to each other. Finally, Kate asked the question she'd been afraid to ask. What do you want, William? Not what you should do, not what's expected of you. What do you actually want? William's answer came slowly, each word weighted with longing and impossibility. I want my brother back. I want my children to know their uncle. I want Archie and Lilibet to grow up knowing George and Charlotte and Louis. I want to not have to choose between my family and my duty. But I don't think I get that. I don't think anyone in my position gets that. Why not? Kate challenged. Who says you can't have both? History, William said bitterly. Every generation of my family that's come before. The institution. The people who remind me daily that personal feelings must come second to the crown. They talked for hours after that. The kind of conversation that unspools in the deep hours of night, when defenses are down and truth comes easier. William told her about the Oprah interview, how he'd tried to call Harry before it aired, how Harry hadn't picked up, how William had sat in this very room and watched his private family pain be broadcast to millions. The things he said, William's voice was hollow. Some of them were true, some of them were, that not the whole story. But I couldn't respond, couldn't defend myself without making it worse. And when I tried to reach out afterward, to talk about it privately, he said I'd had my chance, that I'd chosen silence over support, and now he was choosing to tell his truth. Kate had watched that interview, had felt her own complicated mixture of empathy and frustration for Meghan's clear pain, for Harry's anger, for William's impossible position. But she hadn't known William had tried to stop it. Hadn't known he'd reached out and been shut out. He texted me a few weeks later, William continued, reaching for his phone again. He found the message, dated months after the interview. You felt betrayed by what I said. I get that. But I felt betrayed long before I ever sat down with Oprah. We're even. Is that what this is? Kate asked. Keeping score? I don't know what it is anymore, William admitted. He says he felt abandoned, that the family chose reputation over truth, that Meghan was never protected the way you were. Kate flinched at that. It was a comparison that had been made publicly, painfully, and there was truth in it, even if the full story was more complicated than headlines could capture. He's right about some of it, William said. I can see that now. Things should have been done differently. But Kate, I don't know how to fix something when I don't fully understand what I did wrong. I've asked him. In these texts, in the few phone calls we've had, I've asked him to help me understand. And he won't give me a straight answer, just accusations and hurt, and this wall I can't scale. Kate was quiet, processing. Then she said carefully, he's grieving. Not just your mum, but the life he thought he'd have. The brother he thought you'd be. The family he thought would protect him and Meghan. And grief doesn't always make sense. It doesn't answer direct questions. It just hurts. And what about what I've lost? William's voice rose slightly. I lost him too. I grieve too. He's not the only one who had expectations that didn't match reality. I know, Kate said. She squeezed his hand. I know. They sat with that for a while. Twin losses that couldn't be compared, couldn't be ranked, could only be acknowledged. The palace has advised me to stop reaching out, William said eventually. The private secretaries, the communications team, they all say it makes us look weak, that Harry made his choice. That every text, every attempt, just gives him ammunition for another interview or book. Kate felt anger flare hot in her chest. Since when do we let them dictate our family relationships? William laughed, but it was bitter, hollow. Since we agreed to be the next king and queen. The conversation shifted then, as the night deepened and exhaustion began to blur the edges of their thoughts. They talked about the children. About what to tell George, Charlotte, and Louis. About how to explain an absence that had become a defining feature of their family landscape. They asked about Harry and Meghan. Kate said. About Archie and Lilibet. They're cousins they barely know. I know, William said. George asked me last month if Uncle Harry was ever coming back. I didn't know what to tell him. What did you say? I said maybe someday. But I don't think he believed me. William's face crumpled slightly. God, Kate. The way he looked at me. Like he knew I was lying but was trying to be polite about it. He's 11. He shouldn't have to navigate this kind of complicated family politics. Kate thought about George, sensitive, perceptive George, who noticed everything and felt everything deeply. He's old enough to sense the tension. Even here, even in our protected little world, things leak through. He hears whispers at school, sees headlines on newspapers when we're out. We've been telling him that Uncle Harry and Aunt Meghan live in America now, that we'll see them when we can. But it's not enough anymore. What do you want to tell him? William asked. The truth? Age-appropriate truth. Yes, Kate said. They deserve that. Especially George. William's face darkened. If we tell them the truth, that there's a rift, that it might never heal, what does that do to them? George will grow up knowing he might lose his siblings, the same way I lost Harry. That's the narrative he'll carry. That's the fear he'll live with. Kate felt the weight of the succession in that moment. The terrible mathematics of royal birth order. George's destiny was already written. The pressure that would come. The isolation. The impossible expectations. And now, the fear that he might lose Charlotte and Louis, the way William had lost Harry. We'll do it differently, Kate said firmly. We're already doing it differently. George knows he's loved first, Prince second. That's not going to change. But is that enough, when the institution demands everything? William's question hung in the air between them, unanswerable. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, After Mum died, when we were at Balmoral, I remember Papa trying to comfort me. He meant well, but he talked about duty, about service, about how we had to carry on because that's what was expected of us. And I remember thinking, I don't want to talk about duty. I want to talk about Mum. I want to cry. I want someone to tell me it's okay that I'm not okay. Kate's eyes filled with tears. She'd heard pieces of this story before, but never quite like this. Never with this rawness. I don't want to be that father, William continued, his voice breaking. But I don't know how to prepare George for what's coming without breaking his childhood. How do I tell him that his life will never be fully his own? That he'll always have to choose between what he wants and what's expected? How do I do that without destroying something in him? Kate didn't have an answer. She just held him. Eventually, William reached for his phone one more time. There's something else, he said. Something I haven't sent. He opened his notes app, scrolled to a draft. I wrote this 3 weeks ago. 2 in the morning. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop thinking about everything we'd lost. He handed Kate the phone. She read the unsent message, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Harry, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll respond, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I don't know exactly what I'm sorry, for you've never given me a clear answer to that. But I know I failed you somehow, failed to protect you, failed to understand what you needed, failed to be the brother you deserved. I miss you. God, I miss you. I miss the way we used to laugh until we couldn't breathe. I miss having someone who understood what it was like to grow up in this strange, impossible world. I miss my brother. I know you can't come back. I understand why. I don't agree with all of it, but I understand. And I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking, can we find a way forward? Some way to be brothers again. even if it looks different than it used to? George asked about you yesterday. He wanted to know if you were ever going to visit. I didn't know what to tell him. I don't want him to grow up thinking family is disposable. I don't want Charlotte and Louis to forget they have an uncle who loved them once. I don't want any of this to be the legacy we leave them. I'm not good at this, at saying what I feel. You know that. But I'm trying. I'll keep trying. Even if you never respond to this, even if you can't forgive me for whatever it is I've done, I'll keep trying, because you're my brother, and I don't know how to stop loving you. W. Kate looked up from the phone, her vision blurred with tears. William, this is beautiful. This is real. Real doesn't fix broken, William said quietly. But maybe it's a start, Kate countered. Maybe it's the beginning of something, or maybe he won't respond and nothing changes. But at least you'll have said it. At least you'll have tried, in the most honest way you know how. William took the phone back, stared at the unsent message. What if he doesn't respond? Then he doesn't respond, and that will hurt. But you'll know you did everything you could. What if he does respond, and it's more anger, more accusations? I don't know if I can take that right now. Kate understood that fear, understood the particular terror of opening yourself up completely and having that vulnerability used as a weapon. But she also knew that some risks were worth taking. Some bridges were worth building, even if you weren't sure they'd hold. I can't tell you what to do, she said finally. This is your relationship with your brother. But I can tell you that carrying this alone isn't working. That these secret conversations at 2 a.m, this weight you're shouldering by yourself, it's not making anything better. It's just making you tired. William nodded slowly. He didn't say he'd send it, but he didn't delete it either. They sat there together on the floor of their bedroom, backs against the bed, the unsent message glowing between them like a fragile hope neither of them was quite ready to name. Outside, the night was deepest dark. Inside, something had shifted. The secret was no longer secret. The weight was shared. And though nothing was resolved, Harry was still half a world away. The rift still gaped between them. The future still uncertain. At least they were facing it together now. At least they had that. Morning came too soon, pale light filtering through the curtains like an unwelcome guest. Kate woke to the sound of Louis calling for her from down the hall, his voice bright and insistent, oblivious to the fact that his parents had barely slept. She forced herself out of bed, every muscle heavy with exhaustion, and found William already up, standing at the window in his pajamas, staring out at the garden. You should have woken me, she said softly. Couldn't sleep, he replied without turning. Didn't see the point in both of us lying awake. She moved to him, slipped her hand into his. For a moment they stood there together, watching the early morning mist curl around the trees, before Louis called again, and reality pulled them back into the day. Breakfast was chaos, the way it always was. Louis knocked over his juice within the first 5 minutes, the orange liquid spreading across the table in a vivid pool that soaked into Charlotte's placemat. She shrieked, more from indignation than actual distress, and complained loudly that her porridge was too lumpy, too hot, too everything. Just eat it, Charlotte, Kate said, her patience thinner than usual. She was mopping up the juice with a tea towel, trying to save the stack of permission slips that needed signing before school. George sat at the far end of the table, quiet as always, a book propped against his water glass. He hadn't touched his toast. Kate noticed but didn't comment, too busy managing the small disasters erupting around her. William moved through the morning on autopilot, packing lunches, finding lost shoes, signing the permission slips Kate had rescued from the juice. His movements were mechanical, efficient, but distant, as if his body was performing the tasks while his mind was somewhere else entirely. Kate caught him staring at his phone. He wasn't scrolling, wasn't reading, just holding it, looking at the screen with an expression she couldn't quite read. When she moved closer, she saw what had captured his attention. Harry's contact. Just the name. The profile picture. An old photo from years ago. Both brothers laughing at something long forgotten. William's thumb hovered over it, but didn't press. "William," she said quietly, and he, startled, locked the phone quickly. "Sorry." Miles away. "I can see that." Before she could say more, George spoke from his end of the table. "Dad, you look sad." The room went still. Charlotte stopped complaining about her porridge. Louis paused mid-chew. Even the morning itself seemed to hold its breath. William set down his phone, moved around the table, and knelt in front of George's chair, eye level. The way he always did when something important needed to be said. "Just thinking about grown-up things, mate," he said, his voice carefully steady. "But I'm okay. Promise." George looked at him for a long moment. Those observant hazel eyes, taking in more than an 11-year-old should have to see. Then he said, simply, "Uncle Harry things?" Kate felt the air leave her lungs. William's face went very still. How did he know? How could he possibly know? George Williams started, but George interrupted, his voice small but clear. "I heard you and Mum talking last night. I wasn't trying to listen. I couldn't sleep, and I went to get water, and I heard you. In your room." William and Kate exchanged a look over George's head, a whole conversation in a single glance. How much had he heard? How much did he understand? And more importantly, what did they do now? The decision formed wordlessly between them. No more secrets. No more protecting the children from truths they were already sensing. George deserved honesty. They all did. "Put on your wellies," William said, standing. "Let's go for a walk in the garden." The garden was still wet with morning dew, the grass soaking the hems of their pajama bottoms as they walked. William kept one hand on George's shoulder. Kate walked on George's other side. Charlotte and Louis had stayed inside with their breakfast, oblivious to the gravity of this moment, and Kate was grateful for that. This conversation needed to be just the three of them. They stopped by the old oak tree at the far edge of the property, the one with the rope swing William had hung last summer. George had spent hours on that swing, pumping his legs, flying higher and higher, laughing. Now he stood beneath it, waiting. William crouched down again, bringing himself to George's height. Kate stood behind them both, one hand on William's shoulder, anchoring him. "Uncle Harry and I," William began, "we're going through something difficult. Families sometimes do." George nodded slowly, processing. "Did you have a fight? Like me and Charlotte?" Kate felt her heart crack. The innocence of that question, the attempt to fit something incomprehensibly adult into the framework of sibling squabbles over toys and who got to sit in the front seat. "A little bit," she said carefully. "But also, Uncle Harry has made different choices. He lives far away now, and sometimes that makes things complicated." "Because he left?" George asked. "Because he didn't want to be a prince anymore?" William flinched almost imperceptibly. "It's more complicated than that, George. It's about what people need to be happy, what they can and can't live with. Uncle Harry needed something different than what we have here." George was quiet for a moment, and then he asked the question Kate had been dreading. "Will Charlotte and Louis and I stop talking when we grow up?" "No." William's response was immediate, fierce. "Never. I won't let that happen." But then, and Kate loved him for this, he added the harder truth. "George, I want to promise you it'll always be perfect. That you and your brother and sister will never have difficulties, never disagree about important things. But the truth is, being part of this family comes with pressures, with responsibilities. And sometimes those pressures can hurt relationships if we're not careful." Kate knelt beside William, adding her voice to his. "But here's what's different. We're talking about it. Right now. We're not keeping secrets from you. And we're going to make sure you, Charlotte and Louis, always have each other. That you always know you can come to us. That you always know love comes before duty." George absorbed this, his young face serious, in a way that made him look older than his years. Kate could see him trying to understand, trying to fit together puzzle pieces he didn't yet have all of. "Can we fix it?" he asked finally. "With Uncle Harry?" William's face contorted with pain. Kate squeezed his shoulder, felt the tension in his muscles, the weight of everything he was trying to hold. "I don't know, George," William said, his voice rough. "I'm trying. But some things. Sometimes people hurt so much that they don't know how to stop hurting, even when others try to help." And then George did something neither of them expected. He threw his arms around William's neck, holding him tight, this small boy trying to comfort his father with the fierce intensity only children possess. "I love you, Daddy," George said into William's shoulder. "I love Uncle Harry too, even if I don't really remember him much." That's when William broke. Kate saw it happen, saw the careful control he'd been maintaining shatter like glass. Tears came, the kind he'd been holding back for months, maybe years. He wrapped his arms around George and just held him, this child who was wise beyond his years, who somehow understood that sometimes the grown-ups needed comfort too. Kate watched them, her own vision blurring, and thought about all the ways love manifests in truth-telling, in vulnerability, in a child's instinct to hold what's breaking. Later, after the children had gone to school, Kate found herself in the bathroom, the master bathroom that had become, she realized, her private space for processing. The place she came when the weight became too much to carry in front of others. She sat on the edge of the bathtub and let herself cry. Not just for William and Harry, not just for the rift that might never heal, but for everything that came with it, for George's inevitable burden, for the pressure that would come year after year, weighing him down, for Charlotte and Louis, who would grow up in their brother's shadow, who would have to navigate their own complicated relationships with duty and family. She thought about her own family, the Middletons, with all their imperfections and their glorious normalcy. Sunday dinners that sometimes ended in arguments, siblings who bickered but always came back together, parents who had been allowed to raise their children without the world watching, judging, demanding. Could she give that to her children? Could any version of that exist in this life they'd chosen? Or rather, the life that had chosen them? "Let them be okay," she whispered, to no one, to the universe, to whatever force might be listening. "Let us be enough." Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror, tired, worried, but still standing, still fighting. She wiped her eyes, splashed water on her face, and went back out to face the day. Evening found William in his study, the house finally quiet after the chaos of dinner and bedtime. Kate had settled the children, read stories, fielded questions about homework, and whether they could get a puppy, Charlotte's ongoing campaign. Now the house was settling into its nighttime rhythms, and William was alone, with his thoughts and his phone. He'd been thinking about George all day, about the way his son had held him in the garden, about the simple, devastating question, "Can we fix it?" He opened his phone, navigated to his notes app, read the long message he'd drafted to Harry weeks ago. All those words, all that explanation and apology and desperate hope. He read it through twice, then opened his messages. A memory surfaced, unbidden, his mother's voice from years ago, when he'd been agonizing over some decision he could no longer remember. "The people who matter will never ask you to choose between love and duty. They'll help you find a way to honor both." But Harry was asking him to choose, or maybe Harry wasn't asking at all. Maybe William was the one creating that false binary, that impossible either-or. He looked at the drafted message again, then he deleted it. Instead, he typed something new, something simpler, something that contained all the essential truth, without all the weight. "I love you. I miss you. I'm here when you're ready. Always. W." His thumb hovered over the send button. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. What if Harry didn't respond? What if he did respond with more anger, more accusations? What if this small offering of vulnerability was thrown back in his face? But then he thought about George, about the way his son had asked if they could fix it, as if the answer might be as simple as trying. He pressed send. The whoosh of the message leaving felt like a stone dropping into deep water. Immediate regret. Immediate relief. Immediate terror. All of it at once. Did you send it? William turned to find Kate in the doorway. She'd been standing there, watching, though he hadn't heard her come in. He nodded, not trusting his voice. She crossed the room, sat beside him on the small sofa, took his hand. I don't know if it'll change anything, he said finally. But George was right. I had to try. Kate squeezed his hand. They sat there together in the quiet study, the phone on the table between them, waiting for a response that might never come. Minutes passed. The phone didn't light up, didn't buzz, stayed stubbornly, heartbreakingly silent. But they sat together anyway. And somehow, that was enough. For now, at least, that was enough. The days that followed William's message moved with a strange duality, both achingly slow and impossibly fast. Life continued because it had to, because there were children to raise, and responsibilities to fulfill, and a world that kept turning regardless of personal grief. There were royal engagements. Kate smiled through a hospital visit, admired the new children's wing, accepted flowers from a little girl in a wheelchair. William gave a speech about conservation, his voice steady and assured, every inch the future king. To the outside world, they were flawless. But Kate saw what others didn't. The way William's hand drifted to his phone between conversations. The way he checked it during car rides, during quiet moments at home, during the brief pauses in their carefully orchestrated public life. Always checking, always hoping, always disappointed. There were school runs. George in the front seat now, growing taller every day. Charlotte chattering about her friend Emma's birthday party. Louis still small enough to need help with his seatbelt, sticky fingers leaving prints on the window glass. There was Charlotte's ballet recital on Thursday evening. She danced the part of a flower in some elaborate production, her face serious with concentration, arms extended in careful fifth position. Afterward, she was incandescent with pride, still in her costume, demanding they take her for ice cream even though it was a school night. They went. Kate ordered mint chocolate chip. William barely touched his coffee. His phone sat on the table between them, dark and silent. There was Louis learning to ride his bike in the garden on Saturday morning, William running behind him with one hand on the seat, George shouting encouragement. You've got it, Lou! Keep pedaling! And then the moment of release. William letting go. Louis riding for 5 full seconds before realizing he was doing it alone and promptly crashing into the hedge. But he was laughing, triumphant, demanding they do it again. William smiled, cheered, picked Louis up and set him back on the bike. But Kate saw the way his eyes drifted toward his phone, discarded on the garden table, saw the hope flicker and die each time he looked. No response from Harry, not a word. Not even a read receipt to indicate the message had been seen. Sunday evening, after the children were asleep, Kate found William in the living room, staring at nothing. The television was on but muted, images flickering across the screen without sound. His phone was in his hand, but he wasn't looking at it, just holding it like a talisman that had lost its power. Do you regret sending it? Kate asked quietly, settling. Beside him on the sofa, William was quiet for a long moment. Then, no. Even if he never responds, I needed him to know. He might still. It's been 6 days, Kate. If he was going to respond, he would have. William's voice was flat, resigned. I think that's my answer. The silence is my answer. Kate took his hand. She didn't try to convince him otherwise, didn't offer false hope. They'd been married long enough that she knew when he needed solutions and when he just needed her to sit with him in the disappointment. I'm proud of you," she said finally. "For trying. For being brave enough to reach out even when you knew it might hurt." William squeezed her hand, but said nothing. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Inside, they sat together in the blue glow of the silent television, holding onto each other while the world continued its indifferent spin. Monday afternoon arrived with unexpected warmth, the kind of late autumn day that feels like a gift. Kate was in the kitchen with Charlotte, attempting to bake biscuits for George's class. Charlotte insisted on helping, which meant flour everywhere in her hair, on her nose, across the counter in white drifts that looked like snow. "Mummy, you're not doing it right," Charlotte announced with the absolute certainty of an 8-year-old. "You have to mix it clockwise. That's what Mary Berry does." "Is that so?" Kate asked, biting back a smile. "Yes. George showed me a video. Clockwise makes them fluffier." "Well, we certainly want fluffy biscuits," Kate agreed, adjusting her stirring direction to appease her daughter. Outside, she could see William with the boys. George and Louis were taking turns kicking a football toward the makeshift goal William had set up between two trees. Louis's kicks were enthusiastic, but wildly inaccurate. George's were measured, controlled, already showing the early signs of actual skill. William was laughing, calling out encouragement, diving dramatically to save Louis's shots. For a moment, everything felt normal. Perfect, even. The kitchen warm with baking, her daughter covered in flour, her husband and sons playing in the garden. This was the life they'd built, the sanctuary they'd created inside the chaos of their public roles. Then, the doorbell rang. Kate froze, wooden spoon suspended mid-stir. Charlotte looked up, curious but unconcerned. The doorbell almost never rang at Anmer Hall. Friends called ahead. Family called ahead. Security cleared all visitors before they ever reached the front door. An unexpected doorbell was an anomaly, a disruption in the carefully maintained order of their private life. "Mummy, someone's here," Charlotte stated the obvious, hopping off her stool. Kate set down the spoon, wiped her hands on a tea towel. Her heart had started beating faster, though she couldn't have said why. Just instinct, perhaps. The sense that something was about to shift. She walked to the front door, Charlotte trailing behind her, flour still dusting her small nose. Through the frosted glass she could see a figure, but couldn't make out details. Tall, alone, waiting. Kate opened the door and froze. Standing on her doorstep, looking older and more tired than she remembered, was Charles. Not in any official capacity, no suit, no entourage, no private secretary hovering with a schedule, just Charles in casual clothes, his face drawn but determined, holding what looked like a photograph in his hand. For a moment, Kate couldn't speak, couldn't process why he was here, unannounced, standing at her door in the middle of an ordinary Monday afternoon. "Hello, Kate," Charles said. His voice was gentle but strained. "I'm sorry to arrive unannounced, but this couldn't wait." Charlotte peeked around Kate's legs. "Grandpa?" Charles's face softened slightly. "Hello, Charlotte. Flour in your hair, I see. Baking?" "Biscuits for George's class," Charlotte announced. "We're making them clockwise." Despite everything, Charles smiled. "I'm sure they'll be delicious." Kate finally found her voice. "Charles." Of course. "Come in. I'll get William." But she didn't need to. William had heard voices, had seen the unfamiliar car in the drive. He appeared around the corner from the garden, George and Louis behind him, all three of them grass-stained and windblown. William's face, when he saw his father, was a complicated map of emotions. Shock, certainly, but also fear, and something that might have been hope. "Dad?" William's voice was careful, controlled. "What are you doing here?" Charles stepped fully into the entrance hall. George had instinctively moved to Louis' side, one hand on his little brother's shoulder. Charlotte looked between the adults, sensing the weight of this moment, even if she didn't understand it. "We need to talk," Charles said. His eyes moved from William to Kate, and back again. About Harry. About the family. About... He held up the photograph he'd been carrying, and Kate saw it was old, creased at the edges. Two young boys, arms around each other, laughing at something outside the frame. William and Harry. Years ago. A lifetime ago. About fixing what's broken before it's too late. The words hung in the air. Kate felt William tense beside her, felt the children waiting, felt the entire house holding its breath. "Charlotte, darling," Kate said gently, "why don't you take George and Louis back to the kitchen? Check on our biscuits. Make sure they're not burning." "But Mummy, now, please." Charlotte recognized that tone. She took Louis's hand, and George followed, but all three of them moved slowly, reluctantly, looking back over their shoulders as they went. George's eyes met Kate's, and she saw the question there. "Is everything okay?" She tried to smile reassuringly, but she wasn't sure she succeeded. When the children had gone, when it was just the three of them in the hallway, Charles spoke again. His voice was quieter now, more urgent. "I got a call from Harry yesterday," he said. "First time he's rung me directly in over a year. He told me, William, he told me about your message, about what you said." William's face went very still. What did he say? That he wanted to respond but didn't know how. That he's been carrying so much anger and hurt that he didn't know what to do with an olive branch. Charles paused, his own eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. "And that he asked me to come here, to talk to you both, because his voice cracked, because he's ready to try, if you are." The photograph trembled slightly in Charles's hand. William stared at it, at himself, and Harry frozen in a moment of uncomplicated joy, and Kate watched her husband struggle with hope and doubt and fear in equal measure. "He's ready," William repeated, as if testing the words, seeing if they could be trusted. "He is," Charles said. "But there's more. There's something else we need to discuss. Something that's going to affect all of us." His gaze moved to Kate, and she saw genuine worry there. "My health. There have been complications. Nothing immediately dire, but serious enough that we need to talk about the future. About succession planning. About what happens next." Kate felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Succession planning. The words she'd been dreading for years. The conversation that made everything real. That transformed theoretical futures into immediate concerns. What kind of complications? William's voice was measured, but Kate heard the fear underneath. "Not here," Charles said, glancing toward the kitchen where the children's voices could be heard. "Not with," he gestured vaguely. "I need to speak with you both properly. There's a car outside. We need to go to Clarence's house. Now. There's a meeting scheduled, the private secretaries, the Queen's advisors, your mother's team, Kate, everyone who needs to know." "A meeting?" Kate heard herself say. "About succession?" Charles nodded. "And about Harry. Because whether we like it or not, any plan for the future of the monarchy has to account for the fact that we're currently a family divided. And that can't continue." He looked at William, really looked at him, and Kate saw the weight of fatherhood and kingship warring in that gaze. "Harry's willing to talk, William, to try to find a way forward. But we need to do it now, before the public narrative gets any worse, before the rift becomes permanent, before He trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Before he couldn't mediate anymore. Before time ran out. William and Kate exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations that happened in the space between heartbeats. The children, their afternoon, the ordinary life they'd been living just moments ago. All of it suddenly suspended, waiting. "I'll call for someone to stay with the children," Kate said quietly, already reaching for her phone. Kate Williams started. "No," she said firmly. "If this is about our future, I'm there. We face it together. Remember?" William nodded slowly. Then he turned back to his father. How long have you known? About your health? Long enough, Charles admitted. Too long, perhaps. But I wasn't ready to. I thought I had more time. Don't we all? William said, and Kate heard the bitterness there, the grief for all the time already lost. Charles stepped closer, held out the photograph. William took it, stared down at his younger self and the brother he'd lost. Harry asked me to give you this, Charles said. He said to tell you he still has the matching one. That he looks at it sometimes and wonders if that version of you and him still exists somewhere. If maybe we could find our way back to them. William's hand trembled around the photograph. Kate moved closer, her hand finding the small of his back, anchoring him. There's something else, Charles said, his voice dropping even lower. Harry's coming. Not today, but soon. He's agreed to come, back to London for a private meeting. Just family. No press. No statements. Just us. Trying to. He searched for the right word. Repair. If we can. The hallway suddenly felt too small, too warm. Kate could hear Charlotte in the kitchen, singing some song from school. Could hear Louis's laughter. Could hear George's quiet voice, reading ingredients off a package. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. But everything had just tilted on its axis, and she didn't know if they'd ever find their balance again. When? William asked. That's what we need to discuss at Clarence House, Charles said. The timing, the logistics, the message we send both publicly and privately. Because once this starts, once we commit to reconciliation, there's no going back. It will change everything, for all of us. William looked at Kate. She saw the question in his eyes. Are we ready for this? She squeezed his hand, held his gaze, and nodded. They'd never be ready, but they'd face it together. Give us 10 minutes, William said to his father. We need to arrange care for the children and change. Charles nodded, looking relieved and anxious in equal measure. I'll wait in the car. After he'd gone, after the door closed behind him, William and Kate stood in the sudden silence of their hallway. The photograph of two young boys hung between them, a ghost of what was and a promise of what might be. Everything's about to change, Kate said softly. It already has, William replied. From the kitchen, Charlotte called out, Mummy, the biscuits are ready. Kate felt tears prick her eyes at the innocence of that call, at the ordinary afternoon that had just shattered into extraordinary pieces. She called back, Coming, darling, and her voice barely shook at all. They walked toward the kitchen together, toward their children, and the last moments of before. Because after this, after Clarence House, after whatever revelations waited, after Harry came back, nothing would be the same. The Clarence doorbell had rung, and everything had changed. 20 minutes later, Kate and William stood in the driveway, watching the taillights of the car that would take them to Clarence House disappear around the bend. Kate's mother had arrived within minutes. Bless her for living close, for always being ready, and was already inside with the children, promising stories and extra biscuits and not asking questions she knew wouldn't be answered yet. William still held the photograph. He hadn't let go of it since his father had placed it in his hands. We should go, Kate said gently, but neither of them moved. The afternoon light was golden, slanting through the trees in shafts that made everything look softer, more forgiving. Inside the house, Kate could hear Louis's laughter, could hear her mother's warm voice responding. The life they'd built. The sanctuary they'd created. What if we can't fix it? William asked suddenly, his voice raw. What if we try, and it all falls apart anyway? What if I see Harry, and all the hurt is still there, and we can't find our way past it? Kate took the photograph from his hands, studied the two boys, frozen in joy. Then she looked up at her husband, at this man who carried the weight of a kingdom and couldn't bear the weight of losing his brother. Then at least you'll have tried, she said. And maybe that's all any of us can do. Keep trying. Keep reaching out, even when we're not sure if anyone will reach back. William's eyes were bright with tears he wouldn't let fall. Not yet. Not here. I'm terrified. he admitted. I know, Kate said. So am I. She took his hand, laced her fingers through his, and felt him squeeze back not gently, but desperately, like a man holding on to the only solid thing in a tilting world. Whatever happens at Clarence House, Kate said, whatever your father tells us, whatever plan they've made, we decide, together, you and me. Not the institution, not the advisors. Us. William nodded, unable to speak. From inside, Charlotte appeared at the window, waving enthusiastically, flowers still in her hair. George stood behind her, watching with those too perceptive eyes. And somewhere deeper in the house, Louis was singing, his small voice carrying through the evening air. They need us to be okay, William said. Then we'll be okay, Kate replied. We'll figure it out. We always do. She handed him back the photograph, watched him slip it carefully into his jacket pocket, over his heart. Then they walked toward the waiting car together, toward Clarence House and whatever revelations waited, toward a conversation about succession and health and the future that was coming faster than either of them had imagined, toward Harry, eventually, toward reconciliation or further heartbreak, toward something. The car door opened, they climbed in, and as Anmer Hall disappeared behind them, Kate held William's hand and thought about the text message that had started all of this, the words meant for someone else that had somehow led them here, to this precipice, to this moment of terrible hope. The future was uncertain, the past was broken, but they were together. And for now, for this moment, that would have to be enough.